Starting with metempsychosis. In other words, the doctrine of the transmigration of souls teaches that the same soul inhabits in succession of the bodies of different beings, both men and animals. It was a tenet common to many belief systems of philosophic thought and religious belief, widely separated from each other both geographically and historically. History: Egypt. Herodotus tells us in a well-known passage that the Egyptians were the first to assert the immortality of the soul, and that it passes on the death of the body into another animal, and that when it has gone the round of all forms of life on land, in water, and in air, then it once more enters a human body born for it. And this cycle of the soul takes place in 3,000 years. That the doctrine first originated with the Egyptians is unlikely. It most certainly passed from Egypt into Greece, but the same belief had sprung up independently in many nations from a very early date. The accounts of Egyptian metempsychosis vary considerably. Indeed, such a doctrine was bound to undergo modifications according to the changes in the national religion. In the Book of the Dead, it is connected with the notion of judgment after death, transmigration into infrahuman forms being a punishment for sin. Certain animals were recognized by the Egyptians as the abode of especially wicked persons, and were on this account, according to Plutarch, preferred for sacrificial purposes. So let's talk about the story adventures of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, particularly the Hound of Baskervilles, which illustrates metaphorically what has been and what is now at present moment with Great Britain and with the whole world, with the world as a whole. So this is a detective story, The Hound of Baskervilles, and it is about an ominous dog which was killing people in the Baskerville clan. It starts with an American man arriving in England, which is kind of also interesting and symbolic that somebody actually returns to England and not moving from England into America. And in this story, an American man came to England because he was the real heir of a estate which was belonging to the Baskerville clan. What is the mood of the Hound of the Baskervilles? The mood in the Hound of the Baskerville is dark and ominous. The moor produces sounds in the night, which Dr. Watson describes in the following manner. It came with the wind through the silence of the night, a long deep mutter and a rising howl, and then the sad moan in which it died away. What does Baskerville Hall symbolize? Baskerville Hall comes to symbolize a dreary and depressing mood that is hung over the place. Ultimately, Conan Doyle makes the moor, the hound, and the Baskerville Hall as symbols in his book. Why was the Baskerville family cursed? Dr. James Mortimer recounts to Sherlock Holmes in London an old legend of a curse that reportedly runs in the Baskerville family since the time of English Civil War, when Sir Hugo Baskerville was killed by a huge demonic hound, with the same creature haunting the mires of Dartmoor ever since, causing the premature death of Baskervilles. Is Baskerville Hall a real place? Baskerville Hall was built in 1839 by Thomas Minors Baskerville for his second wife, Elizabeth. The Baskervilles were related to the Dukes of Normandy and first came to Britain to help William the Conqueror in 1066. What is a Grimpen Mire? The Grimpen Mire was a vast bog deep in the heart of Dartmoor in Devon. It was, in local lore, connected to the legend of the Hellhound, which terrorized the Baskerville family in the Hound of Baskerville. The mire was located in an especially isolated part of the region, and there were few nearby settlements. There is a treasure hidden among the stone. So, what I wanted to tell you about this is that, first of all, the American was a true heir and the owner of England estate. And that the detective, whose name was Sherlock Holmes, discovered that the murderer was the neighbor only by looking at the old portraits within this estate, because the person in the portraits looked just like the neighbor. So the person in the portrait was the ancestor who built the estate, and he looked just like the neighbor, Stapleton. So he concluded that he was one of the bloodline and he was contesting the inheritance and killing everybody off. So sometimes all we have is old portraits, guys. It also deals with the moors, and right now we know that the moors is where the oil and gas is. And it also deals with chimerism and phosphorus and all these experiments with the dogs, all these pedigrees that they have. And originally, Sherlock Holmes was the name of great wit and inquisitive mind and pioneer of forensics. And if you look at the modern version in the film made by Brits themselves, the Sherlock Holmes character, the main protagonist, which is supposed to be positive, is turned into quote-unquote highly functioning psychopath. And there is also a joke or two, or maybe 10, about him and Dr. Watson being homosexuals. And the Lady of the Heart of Sherlock in modern version is made to be an escorter, and the character is played by the actor with fake name Cumberbatch, and it's just IVF creature in my opinion, similar to this Kate Middleton creature. And this calm thing is just their play of words of these MI6 characters, like the styler, and them writing with semen instead of ink. And all of this is disgusting, and it's just, when I think about it, when this whole operation started and this Zelensky guy was repeating the speech of Churchill, we shall fight on the beaches, we shall never surrender. And I thought, God damn it, he was such a bad actor. But in any case, it's not about that we have to face the bad quality of everything. It's about me fearing that when this stuff is going to roll out, that they are going to introduce into the mass the free energy and all this technology that will ban oil and gas forever. But they didn't, and right now, when almost a year passed, I just think that because of this inbreeding for centuries, they were just inbreeding and inbreeding and inbreeding, and they don't have the technology, they didn't develop anything, and they cannot revive the old technology because they just rely on psychics whom they threaten with brutal force, and they rely on hacking. That's all they do. They surveil, they hack, and they just have this nepotism. Because if you come back to this story, The Hound of Baskervilles, the murderer who was hiding that he was part of the bloodline and killing everybody with a dog, his wife was also his sister, and his sister was his wife. And that's just part of it. It's just part of their disgusting shit. So they were inbreeding and inbreeding and inbreeding for centuries, and so they just, I don't know, they just are degenerates. They are degenerates. They have nothing to offer, and to expect them to do anything, to have some sort of a weapon or be much of a threat beyond this death that they can, of course, do. Beyond that, there is not so much to be afraid of, because the last British scientist, I think, was real scientist, was Aaron Dover, whom they killed. I haven't learned about anyone else from the world in general, or from Great Britain particularly, and it's just that they cannot come up with anything, no technology, no nothing, because they perpetuated lies upon lies about science and everything else. And everything is compartmentalized, and one field of science is not knowing what the other, even related field of science does, even in medicine. And because all is based on lies, there is no breakthrough to anything. And them being degenerates, it's just, I guess that saves us in some way. I was thinking about this stuff about even author Conan Doyle. I saw him recently, a videos showed about levitation. So there were cases of levitation in humans. They are very rare. And most of the things, when you see a person levitate, you will see them, they are a fraud. But there were some genuine cases of levitation, and author Conan Doyle was one of the people who witnessed it in England, and he was invited to observe and investigate and watch the person levitate. And it's a strange world we live in when things like that come up. And when I looked at all this Tesla stuff, I questioned whether Tesla really existed or it's some kind of a fake character that they created, similar to Christopher Columbus. And then I thought, how, if he was for real, so how did he do that? How he done all that? Like, where he got this electric charge from, and how he managed all this. First I thought that he was interacting with pigeons a lot. So I thought, how do pigeons fly, and why pigeon as a spirit is so much talked about in these Bible books. And I thought, maybe it's the blood of pigeons, maybe it's the skin of pigeons, maybe it's the eyes of pigeons, maybe it's their rib cage, or maybe the skeleton that produces electricity. Maybe he did something, he took some compound from pigeons. That's what I thought. And then I realized that it's not like that he just attracted pigeons. He took electric charge that he demonstrated out of himself. I think he fixed his own brain. That's what he did. And I think that he took enormous resource of this electric power from out of himself. That's what he did. I think we are broken inside, and we don't even realize that we are. If we are born healthy, we think that everything is all right, but I believe that our world is not working, our organism is not working properly the way it should. That we have been struck and we were made to crawl. That's what we have. I think we are all brain damaged, and we are born this way. And all the prophecies in this what they call Moshiach, in the Jewish Messiah, and rebuilding the temple, this whole thing deals with rebuilding the brain, fixing the brain to work as it should be. So there will come a person whose brain will work the way it should, and he will fix others, and that's the source of this Messiah. And that's what they talk about when they talk about Mishnah. So if you pay attention, the temple is a building, a structure, a house where spiritual thing happens. But you have the temples also on your head, on the sides of your head. These are parts of your brain system, and that's where all electricity happens. And when you get to this Queen of England and the crown that she wears, it's the type of, it basically shows the brain, the two hemispheres of the brain, and the way that they should be working. So I wanted to say about this sacred text of the Jews, which I'm sure they took from somebody else, and this is something that was an oral tradition that passed through from mouth to mouth, and it's hard to understand it, but they try to explain it as a ritual which happens in the temple, while in my opinion it's talking about the brain, the head of a person, and how it's supposed to work. So when they talk about the temple and the sacrifice and the blood, they think that it's some kind of a ritual, when they really mean the parts of the brain, such as thalamus, I think means bull, and another parts of the brains, the horns, they mean the goat or the lamb, and another part of the brain that also mean the curtain and the arch and everything else that they think are related to ritualistic sacrifice of an animal, in my opinion, is really how the brain should work and how the brain should be sprinkling blood, how the circulation of blood and waters and amino acids, whatever, how when they talk about coals, they talk about they really talk about carbs, what we call carbohydrates, and how they should turn into ether. So Mishnah Yoma, on every day there were 4 arrangements there, but this day there were 5. The statement of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yosei says, on every day 3, but this day 4. Rabbi Yehuda says, on every day 2, but on this day 3. They brought out the spoon and the coal pan. He scoops his handfuls and places into it the spoon, the large corresponding to the large and the small corresponding to the small, and this was the measure. He took the coal pan in his right and the spoon in his left. This is talking about the processes in the hemispheres, the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere. Would walk through the sanctuary until he reaches between the 2 curtains that separated the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies, and between them were cubit. Rabbi Yosei says there was only one curtain there, and it is stated, "And the curtain shall divide for you between the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies." The outer was hooked on the south, and inner hooked on the north. Walks between until he reaches the north. He reaches the north, turns his face to south, walks to his left along the curtain until he reaches the ark. He reaches the ark, he places the colpan between the two staves. He piles the incense atop coals, and the whole chamber in its entirety would fill with smoke. He exits and comes the way he entered. This is talking about the ether being processed through fluids and blood, in my opinion, inside the brain. And he recites a brief prayer in the outer chamber, and he would not extend his prayer, so as not to alarm the Jewish people. After the ark was taken, there was a rock from the days of the early prophets, and was called Foundation, 3 finger breadths higher than the ground, and would place on it. He took the blood from who was stirring it, blood of the bull who was stirring it. He entered into the place that he entered, and stood at the place where he stood, and he sprinkled from 1 upward and 7 downward. And he would neither intend to sprinkle upward nor downward, but rather like one who weeps. And this how he would count: 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 1 and 5, 1 and 6, 1 and 7, emerged and placed on the golden pedestal in the sanctuary. They brought him the goat. He slaughtered it and received its blood in the bowl. He entered into the place that he entered, and stood at the place that he stood, and sprinkled from 1 upward and 7 downward. And this he would count: 1, 1 and 1, and 1 and 2, etc., emerged and placed on the second golden pedestal in the sanctuary. Rabbi Yehuda says there was only one pedestal there, and he took blood of the bull and placed the blood of the goat, and he sprinkled from on the curtain opposite the ark from outside, 1 upward and 7 downward, and he would not intend. And this he would count. He took the blood of the goat and placed blood of the bull, and he sprinkled from on the curtain opposite the ark from outside, 1 upward and 7 downward, etc. He poured the blood of the bull into the blood of the goat, and placed from the full empty. And he should go out to the altar and is before the Lord. This is the golden altar. He began to cleanse downward. From where does he begin? From the northeast corner, northwest, southwest, southeast. He begins for a sin offering on the outer altar. There he finishes on the inner altar. Rabbi Eliezer says he stood in place and sprinkled, and on all the corners he would present from below upward, except for that was before him, which he would present from above downward. On pure of the altar 7 times, and he would pour the remainder of the blood on the western base of the outer altar. He would pour on the outer altar on its southern base. These and those mixed in the canal and flow out to the Kidron River, sold to gardens for fertilizer. Misuses action of Yom Kippur, stating in order, if performed action before another, he has done nothing. He performed the blood of the goat before the blood of the bull. He repeat the action and sprinkle the blood of the goat after the blood of the bull. And if the blood spills before he completed the presentations that inside, he bring other blood and repeat from the beginning inside. And similarly in the sanctuary, and likewise on the golden altar, since they are each of atonement in and of themselves. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say, from the place that he interrupted, there he resumes. So basically it says that how ether or electric current, which is inside our blood, passes through our brain and the spinal cord, and then again in the spinal cord, and how this electrical signal goes. So when they say the left side, the right side, this is what happens. The pyramid, the curtain, for example, somatic reflex arch. So when they talk about arch, it just means this: reflex arc. This is just the structure of our brain that needs to be fixed. That's what it is. And the bull is actually a thalamus. And the pyramid is also there. Not only the temple, the pyramid. The part of the limbic system, limbic lamb, right? Thalamus. Thalamus means bull. And it's not the priest sprinkling blood in the building. It's how the blood goes through the channels of the brain. There is crus, fornix, forcepa, atrium, cow head. As you see, it looks like basically the horns of the goat. Do you see this, the horns of the goat? And it's even called the horn. So frontal horn, fornix column, mammillary body, fimbria, ventricular body, atrium, occipital horn, temporal horn, frontal horn, cerebellum, brainstem, basolateral amygdala, centromedial amygdala extended. So it's basically the wisdom of how to fix your brain. That's what this ancient text says. See, anterior horns. And I often wonder if these parts of the brain are structured this way, like these anterior horns are made to look like the horns of a goat because they somehow communicate or use the energy which is in the Aries constellation. Like stars affect our brain waves. And bull, this thalamus is this Taurus constellation. And there is also the curtain. Everything that is described in this Mishnah, in this Jewish text in Torah, it actually describes the brain. And when they talk about sprinkling the blood, it's not talking about literal blood. It's talking about the blood, how it circulates in our brain and how it should be. The ventricles of the brain are a communicating network of cavities filled with cerebrospinal fluid and located within the brain parenchyma. The ventricular system is composed of two lateral ventricles, the third ventricle, the cerebral aqueduct, and the fourth ventricles. A ventricle is one of two large chambers towards the bottom of the heart that collect and expel blood towards the peripheral beds within the body and lungs. The blood pumped by a ventricle is supplied by an atrium, an adjacent chamber in the upper heart that is smaller than ventricle. So this thing in the temples in India is called Karatala. Thalamus, that means a bull. Kalatala. Talos. So it is what it is.